I'm excited about this class and about the topics for today. Let's open in prayer. Lord, thank you. Thank you for opportunities to talk about what is most important. Thank you for opportunities to change and grow and find support and encouragement. We entrust this time to you and ask that you would bless it, bless us, and help us to be a blessing to others. In Jesus' name, all God's people say, Amen. Yeah. Okay, well, I want to start by reviewing a little bit. And what I'd like to do is to remind us, this is about happiness. And the definition that this research is using for happiness is actually a Greek word I heard in a sermon from Princeton Seminary this week. And it's eudaimonia. So you don't need to know that. But it simply means a state of deep satisfaction in which you find your life has meaning and purpose. And so that's what we're talking about, and that's what Jesus talks about. Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. And that's what Jesus wants for you. That's what I want for you. I want for me and my family. We want that. And so, God willing, we can help each other in that process. And one thing that's key in this is that today's Reformation Sunday, and as Presbyterian, we believe we are reformed and always reforming. And that's for the church, but that's also for us as individuals. One thing that this research shows is that you are always changing. And when I went to seminary, we studied early childhood development. But one thing that this research is also now focusing on is adult development. It's recognizing that adults continue to change and grow, and the change isn't all bad. It's not just gray hair and achy joints. There can be good change. Good change is possible. And so in 84 years so far, continuing of research, there's one simple message, and this is a spoiler alert. Positive relationships are essential to human well-being. Poor relationships affect your health, your happiness, your mental well-being, everything. And so that's what we're focusing on. And so I want to start by asking if you've been able to read in the book, you came across somebody named Wes Travers. When Wes was 7 years old, his abusive father left, never to return. And Wes's older siblings tried to protect him so that he wouldn't have to work. They worked until when he turned 15, he had to work too. I wanted to ask, what do we learn from Wes's life? What are some things that you picked up? Any thoughts about that?
You're certainly not stuck there. You can change, things can change, you can evolve to something better or something worse from that thought.
It's key that you're not fated to unhappiness because of something hard that happened. Yes, Larry.
Well, I think that he, that all the different life events, really helped shape him. I think it sounded like the start of being able to go on the service, it provided him a lot of structure and again, and camaraderie among the people that he was training with really helped fill that huge void that was left, when his, in adolescence and late childhood, when his father left and his family sort of all fell apart in that way.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that this research shows is there will be surprises in life, hard surprises. There will be big challenges. And part of what can lead to a good life is how you respond to that and how others support you in your response to that. Let's see, do we need another chair?
No, there's some back here.
Oh,
I'm good.
excellent. But one other thing about that is he did not advance as an adult, grow, mature at stages as expected. And so one thing that's really important to recognize is sometimes we go through things at a different rate, a different timing. And so it was late in life, actually, that Wes really matured in terms of relationships and being able to trust and commit. And so, in a way, Wes is a story of someone who had so many strikes against him, but ended up to have a very full and rich life. Yeah. One thing that the book invites us to do is to take a photo from your past. So, if you're 35 or younger, it suggests to find a photo of when you were starting your adult life. So maybe 18. Another option, if you're over 35, find a photo of about half your current age. So here's a photo. And that's Dan. So our oldest. And what this invites us to do is to take that photo and look at it, really look at it for a while. Don't look at a photo of me. A photo of you. And think about, what were you thinking about back then? What were you worried about? What were you hopeful about? What were your plans? And when you think about yourself at that point, what do you regret? What do you regret? And so I want to ask, if you were able to do this, what did you experience? Why is this something that Harvard researchers use and recommend for us to? What are your thoughts about that?
If I have any regrets in life, I could say patience, but that's really not. It's fear. You can't fear anything. And this Senior Bush, the president,
Yeah.
he did not fear anything.
No.
And he not after World War II. After World War II, when he should have died, he did not fear anything that he did. And you just can't, you gotta go out and do it, and you can't fear to do it, where we get paralyzed. But don't fear. It's a horrible thing to get into.
Yeah. And so one thing that's interesting is to think, what was I afraid of at half my current age? What were you afraid of, if anything? And why? And what we're doing is looking at our life in the big picture and thinking about what was life like then? What is life like now? And how did I get here? And where do I want to end up? So it's helpful in thinking about the choices we make and the choices we still have. So as I look at this picture, some of the things I was thinking about was, I was worried, will Dan flourish? Will he always recognize I'm here for him? I'll carry him as much as I can. But will there be a time when he carries me? So I was thinking in part, at this point, we were in Michigan and starting at a new church. And I was thinking, is this gonna go well? And Betsy is not gonna be in a church right now. She's gonna attend to Dan. And will that be a good experience for everyone? There's a price to pay. Betsy is sacrificed. And how will that go? And can I bless Betsy? Can I help her know that this sacrifice is precious and I appreciate it and I want to help her? So those were some of the things for me. And we'll talk more about this. I want you to do this. So in a way, this book is working to help you to think about where are you in terms of relationships right now? And where do you want to be? So that's what today is about. And next week, it'll start to equip us to strengthen relationships, to enhance them, because that will make for a good life. So it's important to map. It's important to think about how are things right now. And that's what I want us to do. And one thing that this chapter does is it gives an opportunity to think about stages in life. And so it talks about adolescence, 12 to 19, young adulthood, 20 to 40, midlife, 41 to 65, and what it calls late life, 66 plus. And I wanted to ask, what did you learn from that? Were there things that were helpful in thinking about those stages? Yeah.
To tell the truth, I was not here last week and I have not read the book, but one of the things that I think happens in stages as we get older, which I'm afraid I'm in the last category, is I think that our thoughts change a little bit. We don't worry so much about, oh, I forgot their name. I'm embarrassed to ask them their name. I want to make a difference in people's lives, so I do more for, like in mission, whatever. So I'm anxious to get the book and read it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but I do want to highlight a few things. For adolescents, it gives a really good summary of what an adolescent is going through. And even in terms of on the inside and on the outside. and the role of adults. And so it points out that adolescents are asking, who am I? And they're trying on different answers. And one thing the adolescent needs is adults. But they might not act like it, but research shows they need you. And they need other adults, coaches, teachers. That's just critical to human flourishing. So adolescence, young adulthood is putting potential answers to that question, who am I, to the test. And one thing that it points out is there will be times when it feels like you aren't needed or wanted, but you are, you know. There is a different timing, so different people will go through different stages and different timing. Young adulthood is well summarized in the book, and what's helpful is it says for you, if you are later in life, it's helpful for you to have that big perspective so you can support and understand and not judge. So that's a big part. Midlife, what it points out in midlife is we start to figure out that the main question isn't what can others do for me, but what can I do for the world? It points out JFK was part of this study, and he came to that great speech, that great question, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So just like Vera was saying, God willing, in our midlife, we start to realize, I want to make a difference. I want to give. And then late in life, it actually points out people late in life are generally the happiest. The happiest. That's not what we usually think, is it? We often think, boy, the best years are high school or something. So, yeah, what this is pointing out is that in late in life, you have started to realize what's most important, and you're focusing on that. You're focusing on giving, you're focusing on relationships. And one thing that the summary points out is a big challenge is to learn to accept help. Because you want to give help,
Yeah.
but we need to learn also to receive help. So that's a big part of the learning. Do you remember in the book, there's somebody named Sterling Ainsley, and he's a Harvard grad, and it traces his life. When he was 9, his mom was put into a sanitarium for the second time and to stay, and his dad left. So, much like Wax, Sterling had a very, very challenging childhood, but he had an older sister, and he had a relative who didn't have children who adopted him and loved him as her own. What did you learn about Sterling's life? What do we learn from that?
Later, he didn't have relationships even with his own children. He and his wife separated. I think he remembered how hurt he was when he was young, and he didn't want to be hurt like that again, so he kept everybody at arm's length.
Yeah, he didn't even know if that beloved older sister was still alive. He had not talked to her in 20 years. Yeah. But he felt like he had good relationships with everyone. But what does he do with his time? He mows the lawn for exercise. And he goes to the trailer near him where there's an elderly woman. They watch television together. She falls asleep. He carries her to her bed and then cleans up and then goes home. And he said, I don't know what I would do if she died.
Yeah.
That's how important she is to him. Because you might say he's giving a little bit. He needs a relationship with someone in person. He needs to give of himself, and he is in that small way. But so a couple of things we learned from him. Sterling doesn't do the photo exercise. He doesn't do the charts. He doesn't have any experience of thinking, who are the people most important to me? What's the quality of those relationships and the frequency of contact? He doesn't map or think about where am I in life? How are my relationships? And he does things without thinking. It's just instinct. Keep people at arm's length because they might leave me and hurt me. And so one thing that this whole project is teaching is that change is possible, but it takes work and it takes some thinking about where am I? And is this where I want to be? And if not, where do I want to be? And how can I get there? And the book will provide tools to get there. So for Sterling, do you remember the strangers on the train?
Yeah.
We talked about that last week. Research from the University of Chicago, 2 groups of people, one that said, one would not talk to anyone on the train. One group forced to talk to a stranger on the train, and when they got off the train, they found they were happier. It was a good experience. It taught us what's called affective forecasting. So we predict how we will feel after an experience, and we're terrible. Humans are terrible at it. We think, if I talk to a stranger, I'm gonna be miserable. It's gonna ruin my train ride. We're wrong. Sterling was wrong. He thought if I call my son, if I get together with my son, if I check in regularly with my older sister, they may hurt me. But he didn't realize they will bless me just as they
Even
did.
to add his daughter, who was a cellist
Yeah.
in Italy, who had this major performance, had invited him to come. And he learned Italian, preparing himself to be able to do that. And then in the end, doesn't go.
So in a way, it's a warning that his life is an example of why we do this, why we work at thinking about where are we and where do we want to be. So one thing in chapter 4 is actually mapping our social universe. So it's thinking about who are the people in my life, including Lupe at the rec center, who I don't even know her last name, but when I come into the rec center, she is there to welcome me and to check in with me.
Yes, she
And
is.
she's just. So, there are people like that who help us. And there are people who are energizing for us and people who are depleting for us. And that's just being honest, objective. And it's not saying cut out the people who are depleting, but it is looking at measuring. How often do you have contact with the people who are depleting? And is it too much? How often do you have contact with people who are energizing? And is it enough? And it points out that every day we spend about 11 hours on screen. And if you map that out by years, 18 years of your life will be on screens, depending on what age you are now. How much time are you spending in person with people who are energizing you? Yeah.
I would just like to say what we can make a difference just by smiling at someone. My friend's husband left her many years ago, was all she could do to go to a church in this new town. She said not one person spoke to her, not one person smiled at her, and she'd never been back. So you don't think it's a big deal, just smiling, or maybe you're uncomfortable at first, but boy, it can make a huge difference in someone's life.
It's
I think the thing that occurred to me as I read this is the difference that particularly our church makes in a lot of lives. I'll bet if we looked around the congregation, coming and connecting with people on Sunday morning, maybe the only chance that they have, or the only one that they take advantage of, to actually communicate and they have contact with other people and feel safe. That contact isn't going to be depressing, that it's going to be a positive experience.
Yep.
Sherry, and then Lisa.
I have a question though. So the term you used, I believe, was energized.
Yes.
So what if my definition of energize is different than my daughter Bo's definition of energize?
Yeah. And what I would say is, in a way, this is about you right now.
I know you're
Yeah,
talking to
but-
me.
So, and this is in a way, very much like we've talked about before in terms of illuminators. And Gail and I love that we've talked about that from the book, that the series we had before of being seen and really seeing others. So there are certain people who just bring light and attention to you and care about you deeply and make your life, your day better. And so that's what this is about. Now, in terms of for someone else, it'd be really interesting and helpful for our children, grandchildren to do this too, and then to talk about it. And one thing that I'm hoping we may still do is share with someone about, who are the people who energize us and how much time do we get to spend with them. So it's about quality and frequency. And there are certain people, they're just far away. We may not get to spend much time with them, but hopefully we can prioritize.
Tom,
Yeah, yes.
yeah, if I could, last night we had a experiment here that I didn't even know was an experiment around the dining room table. As some of you might know this, but most of you probably don't, that when I retired when I was 71, and I went through a 2-year, what I call my post-retirement adjustment syndrome. It's a long story, but just to say it took a while. Well, during that time, like the grandchildren, they're almost 10 and 8 now, 9 and 7. And they would come and visit, but it wasn't, the conversations weren't like fun, and I think, and they knew grandma's going through something. Well, last night they came for dinner And what I noticed is they kept saying, well, do you have any more stories about that? Do you have any more stories about that? And it was like a science experiment. I said to God, and they just couldn't get enough of stories about the family and who was who and who did what. And it was just like the most joyful thing. And I thought, wow, have we turned a corner here?
Man, that's beautiful. Thank you, thank you. And Lisa.
I don't have anything. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure Gail got
Yeah,
to speak.
beautiful. Thank you. And Sally.
So I always react to that word frequent.
Yeah.
Because we have 20 in our family.
Yeah.
We're very blessed, 4
Yeah.
children, 3 grandchildren, we're married. And so when you're an extrovert, like my dad and I, were extrovert pluses, we're like way out there. That frequent means a lot different to the rest of my family who are probably, introverts.
Yeah.
And I can name the 2 grandchildren that are extroverts, one's 9, one's 25. The 25-year-old might approach me, yeah, he's said. So I just struggle with, I want that frequency, but the way life is now and culture, it's so different, yeah.
I'm thinking the same thing a little bit. We have a huge extended family and I have a lot of cousins, and maybe a better word would be consistent
Yeah.
versus frequent, you
Yeah,
know, because sometimes a 6-month check-in with a cousin is really important, but they wouldn't expect me to be calling them every month.
Right, right.
Yeah, and one thing that's important, and Johnny just said, it really is individual and personal. So, what the authors point out is for you, just every 6 months might be perfect for them to keep it up. So it just depends.
Well, I just wanted to say that sometimes your family isn't around you.
Yeah,
My sons both live out of Ohio, several of my siblings do. So people who are your friends become family.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so that is also very important.
That's very important. Yeah, and we have an aunt and uncle who have no children. And they call it family. And for Thanksgiving, they get together with their family. Yeah. I did want to also recognize that on page 107 and page 111, it talks about charting relationships. So looking at, now that you've thought about who is in your life and who energizes you, who takes energy, how frequent do you see them? Do you want to change that in any way? To increase, to be more consistent? It then comes to looking at who provides support for you and who are the people you support. And so thinking through that too. And so what I would like to do, if you don't mind, is actually now pair up. And online, I'd like to invite you to talk with each other online. And we'll mute you here, so don't worry, we're not eavesdropping. But I would like for you to share with someone next to you. And Spencer, if you don't mind, I'd like you and your mom to switch. So Tom
Yeah.
will be with Spencer, Suzanne, you'll be with Johnny. So, and Mary with Vera, Bill with Sally, and you pair up this way. And I would like it for you. And let me just explain. So, yes. You can share, as much as little as you want, obviously we don't have much time. But what I'd like you to reflect on is, pretend you have a photo. If you do have it, I have mine, it suggests we use it as a bookmark. So if you want to share anything that you learn from even picturing yourself at half your current age or when you first started adult life? What do you learn from thinking about yourself then, thinking about yourself now? Or as you map out relationships, what strikes you? Because it's important. What do we learn? Because that will motivate us for what we're talking about next time is, okay, we see the need for change. How are we gonna change? It's easy to say, I'm gonna change, and then we don't. How can we make it happen? Okay, so I'll be thing one this morning, so I have to do the call to worship, the announcements. You can stay here till a couple minutes before 10 if you want. You also could set a time to get together this week or a coffee hour after the 10 o'clock. And you are talking perhaps to someone you don't know well. Feel free to go very slowly and just not to share much if you're not ready, okay? But enjoy and God bless you. And if there's somebody who needs a partner, it can be one too. All right. God bless you.
Yeah.
Okay, can we mute them?
You know how they would talk to each other.
How do we do this?
Tom? Oh, I see.
Ah, how do we mute everyone else? Can we talk, the ones who are on screen?
There's a way for us to be in a group, but I don't think we can set up the group.
Let's see. I think he has to turn them off. So they can't